So you know how women are not funny? That wasn't a true statement. But there is the notion out there that female comedians just are not funny, and there are some prime examples of massively unfunny comedians being greatly lauded female comedians. So it's not exactly a surprise that someone would get the impression that there are no funny female comedians. But the moment you scratch like the surface of the comedy world, you already will find that there is no dearth of women doing great comedy. It's just that there's very few women among the greats, and by the greats, I do mean people in terms of quality, not success. Like, there's a difference between being incredibly good at something that you do and being incredibly successful at something that you do. In any field that isn't like professional sports, where your success can actually be objectively measured in numbers, your skill at whatever you're doing certainly correlates with your success, but there comes a point where it's less and less relevant. Being successful usually requires different skills than whatever the skill is that you are actually trying to be successful with. And if you suck at those other skills, you're going to have a much harder time being successful, no matter how good you are at the actual skill that you are trying to get successful with. And conversely, if you're good at the success skills, you can be mediocre at the main skill and still make it big. And that is really where you get to see the difference in the comedy world, because among the people who are mega successful in like comedians, there is a ratio of people who are there because they are extremely good and people who are there in spite of the fact that they're kind of mediocre. And with women, it appears as though this group is slightly skewed toward the latter. And overall, it would also appear that even among women, the female comedians, which are certainly very funny, very few of them are actually truly great, right? I mean, we're running into the statistical problem that the comedy field, like many other fields, is massively male-dominated, and there isn't really an objective ratio to say when a comedian is actually like a great comedian or a comics comic, so we can't even calculate the ratios. But it's a phenomenon that appears to be the case in many fields, even the ones that are female-dominated, which, granted, tend to not be fields where individuals stand out much. Now, evolutionary psychology offers a reason as to why this is the case, which I personally think is more of a band-aid, and doesn't explain a lot and isn't particularly useful to us in the question that we're asking ourselves, but let's get into it anyway. There is evidence that suggests strongly that though the average intelligence of women and men is the same, men tend to crowd more along the edges of the bell curve. What this means is that there are more women of average intelligence than there are men of average intelligence, there are more super genius men than there are super genius women, and there are more just incredibly stupid imbecile men than there are just incredibly stupid imbecile women. And this may be true, but it doesn't really help us with explaining why this is the case. And also it doesn't particularly help us with applying this to the Mount Olympus of any given field, because the Mount Olympus of any given field tends to play host to a very small number of people. And as everybody knows, the smaller the group, the less sense it makes to judge that group with statistical metrics that apply to groups, because we get closer to the individual. It makes no statistical sense to do that. Don't do that. This is why stereotyping is dumb. Now, I rather believe that the main reason why so few women actually become so incredibly good at their craft that they are legends is because of a very particular opportunity that they are denied by society. And that is the opportunity to get good. In any given field, there is no shortage of women with the potential to become outstanding exemplars of that field. This is just the law of big numbers. This has to be the case statistically about any field. The thing is, talent doesn't mean skill. Just because you are talented at something doesn't mean you will just on your own organically and naturally develop into being truly great at it. You need to be properly instructed and given the tools to properly instruct yourself on developing the skills that you are trying to develop. And for that, you need encouragement, but you also need criticism. And that's the thing that society at large fails to deliver to women. We don't give them crap for being crap. You know how there's a lot of people who are really good at what they do, and then once they become massively successful, they kind of lose their edge? This happens to men and women in equal parts, by the way. This is ultimately a truly human, non-gendered phenomenon. This is because success surrounds them with yes men. All around them is just people who will tell them that whatever turd they just crapped out is solid gold. And then you have all of the greats that don't lose their edge, and the thing that they all have in common is depression. So it doesn't really matter how many people tell them that they're the best person who ever was able to do the thing, they won't believe it. It sounds like a terrible fate, and it is, but in order to become great and stay great at the skill that we have, we need the voice of criticism. And ideally, that shouldn't come from a debilitating mental disorder, but from constructive feedback of people we trust that are close to us and whose opinions we value. And let's be honest, people of all of the genders, we don't really give this to women, especially young women. And we have different reasons for it. For anyone who is attracted to women, we kind of have a tendency to not criticize anything that they do because we're simping in hopes of getting into their pants. Because the thing that we think and the experience that we have thus far made is that the moment we criticize something that that woman cares about, they won't like us anymore and get mad, and that is something we wish to avoid at all costs. And sure, not being used to being criticized from all sides for something that they do may be a factor, but also, and this is important, there's a time and a place for criticism, and there's a way to put criticism that is actually constructive, because destructive criticism is just as useless and destructive as endless praise. And because we're more focused on getting pussy than taking whatever it is they are doing and they are passionate about seriously, well, the priorities are skewed, and so the criticism won't come out the way it should. That being said, endless praise is still massively disrespectful to that person because we are essentially lying to them about something that they care about. They have a skill that they want to be good at. They care about that skill. And so us telling them bullshit about that skill because we don't care about the same things they do kind of fucked up. But people who are not attracted to women also simp. It's just for different reasons. Especially among women, there is this notion of the sisterhood. Women have to stick together and help each other get places. And I do blame modern feminism for telling women that the success at whatever they do is more important than actually being good at the thing. Because obviously, you know, being extremely good at the thing doesn't guarantee that you will be successful at the thing and they will be able to hold you up as a woman at the top of her field. Whereas if you just are successful, that does that, even if you're not particularly good at the thing. So very often, even people who are not trying to get into women's pants will lie to them about how good what they do actually is, thus depriving them of the valuable and honest feedback that they need to grow. So the only women who actually get that opportunity are the ones who happen to be lucky enough to run into a mentor who will actually be honest in their feedback with them, of which there are few. Or it's women who have enough self-reflection to objectively ascertain the quality of the work that they produce. So exactly no single human soul that has ever existed in the entire history of humanity, because people like this do not exist. So what it boils down to is women with depression. Okay, listen, this is important. Unless the quality of your work can be easily objectively measured, I don't care what you do and how good you are at self-reflection and how impartial you are. You cannot objectively ascertain the quality of your work. You are too close to it. You either think it's way better than it actually is, or you think that it is way worse than it actually is, but you are nowhere near how good it actually is. No matter how much divine self-reflection you are imbued with, human beings do not function in this manner, and it's okay that you can't do that, because nobody can. It is, in fact, your inability to do that that actually enables you to do the thing. This is why we have other people judge the work that we do, and most of the time, they are also wrong. Also, nobody likes being criticized. I know that there's a lot of us who pretend that we do. I myself am one of those people, because we understand that it'll help us grow and improve our skills. But let's be honest here for a second, we don't like it. We will smile and nod and convince ourselves that this is good for us because it is. But in the back of our minds, we're going, fuck you, you piece of shit, I am perfect, please stop hurting my feelings. And if you try to tell me otherwise, the only person you're lying to is yourself. Because it doesn't matter how confident we are in our abilities, there is always that sliver of doubt, and there is always that fear that people will find out that we actually suck. Or at least the fear that people will think that we suck, even if we ourselves are convinced of the opposite. It is thus understandable that we as human beings will try to surround ourselves with unconditional praise and cut out all of the parts of our lives that don't give us unconditional praise. This makes sense. It is very human to want to be appreciated for what one does. Being criticized is a skill that can and has to be learned just as much as the act of criticizing itself. And by often not criticizing women when we should be, we are denying them of the opportunity to do so. And that is a shame, just as much as it is a shame that we deny different opportunities to people who hate themselves by criticizing them too much, because that also happens. There isn't really a blanket solution to this problem, because every individual is ultimately different, which also makes this kind of a problem where gender shouldn't ultimately play as much of a role as it does. But listen, it's fine to be someone who has talent at a thing, but also isn't amazingly great at that thing. Everybody started out that way. It's the baseline that enables you to go anywhere at all. Everyone needs praise and everyone needs criticism, and to understand when it is appropriate to deliver those things in a way that is appropriate is also a skill that pretty much everyone could use some being better at. A small hint though, that usually the praise should outweigh the criticism, even if more criticism is warranted. And obviously this isn't the only reason for the differences between the various genders, and I shouldn't have to point this out specifically because it should go without saying, but I am pointing it out specifically so nobody can claim that I said otherwise, as if that would stop them. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the things. Share this to your relevant communities, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Subscribestar or Patreon if you can afford it in these current trying times. Maybe buying some of my merchandise or the ebook of my short story collection, which is still shipping. And in that spirit, if you're someone who is making anything, please consider learning the value of criticism. And if you are someone who sees this video as an excuse to just criticize people because you're thinking that this is doing them good no matter the context or when or how you do it, that is not the purpose of this video. I am pointing this out specifically now in case you didn't get the message. Doing that is just as destructive. And see you around, cunts.